all you.
All right, great. Well, thanks. Well, hi everybody. I think we're, at least based on paper, we're looking pretty good in terms of total numbers. So thanks for taking some time. I'm just gonna quick homework, and then I'll get out of the way and let the conversation start. This is the third in what is actually up to a 9-part series, if you can believe that, of our Collegian AIG roundtables. So we're really thrilled about what we've been doing. I mentioned it on all of these. We'll be posting recordings of these to now, thanks to Megan, both our Collegian AIG LinkedIn page and Facebook as well. So if you miss it and you signed up, or if you are on today and would like to go back and pick up some pieces that you missed, feel free to check it out there. And obviously, if you're not a member, feel free to sign up there or to follow us on those pages. Thanks in advance to Mike Signora, to Halle Stockton, and to Karen Pallotta for joining us. We're thrilled. The topic of management and leadership, certainly in these times, in any times, is relevant and critical. But certainly right now, wherever you're working from and however you're working, it feels like there's something new and a new challenge every day. So really excited about everyone we have, and we appreciate. I know we had a last minute change, but thank you, Grace, for jumping in and helping us with moderating. I'll hand it over to you to kick it off with questions, and then hopefully we'll have some ample time at the back end to open it up for students and anyone else who's on today to ask questions of our 3 panelists. So take it away. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Just to recap, my name is Grace Miller. I am a junior at Penn State currently, and I am the Collegian's assistant news editor. So Erin was supposed to be here. Erin's our just top news editor, but she's not feeling well, unfortunately. So I am filling in as the moderator, but I'm happy to be here. We are excited to have everyone participate in this discussion. So if you don't know, we have 3 Collegian alumni here to speak with everybody and offer their best words of advice for how to manage and lead during the coronavirus pandemic. Very timely. So to introduce our panelists, and if I say your name wrong, please correct me. But first we have Halle Stockton, who is the managing editor of PublicSource, which is a nonprofit digital-only news organization based in Pittsburgh. All right, so then the second one, we also have Karen Pallotta, who is a corporate board director serving on the compensation and nominating and governance committees of Stewart Title Services. She also runs a small consulting business. And last but not least, we have Michael Signora, who is the Senior Vice President of Football and International Communications for the NFL. So to start us off, I have some questions prepared. And if anybody has follow-up questions or related questions, feel free to jump in. And then, like it was said, we'll have some time at the end then for Q&A. To our guests, thank you again for being here. And then let's get started. So these questions are kind of just based toward whoever would like to answer if we're going to jump in. So first, how can a leader effectively promote high levels of performance and hold staff members accountable while also showing concern during these difficult times? So kind of balancing that, the workload and the empathy components of that.
Who wants to jump in? You might want to tell us. I'm happy to kick us off here.
It is Halle, right?
It's Halle. Yep, you got
Halle.
it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been something that has really been on our minds a lot in the last several months. In fact, I've been counting the days of quarantine. We're coming up on 200 days here toward the end of the month, which is wild. But it's particularly, and I'm sure everybody feels this way with their different industries. And in journalism, we're actually like exposing ourselves to a lot of trauma and everything beyond our own isolation and issues. So it's even like, sometimes it feels even more magnified to us when we're talking about it, when we're, talking with our reporters about kind of all all the information and personal experiences of others they're taking in. So we have like, but at the same time, we have really ambitious goals for the organization that we just can't afford to put on hold. So we have been balancing this idea of, giving people the time that they need to process changes in their lives, if they have children at home, if they are going through health issues or have family members who are going through health issues. We've also had additional issues come up, and with the summer of civil unrest, we have journalists, team members of color who particularly hit hard. So what we're finding is that we can get these organizational goals and get to them quicker when we do pay attention and show concern and give the space to our team that they need. And we have to like intentionally go out of our way and remind each other as managers, this person is like put in a lot of work here. Like maybe we should consider extra personal days, or, we have people on the team that are now kind of coming to us and being like, I'm sort of detecting a little bit of burnout with this person, because they know that every time we're talking to them, we're driving this home. So now we have like little alert system built in, which is actually proving to be really helpful in being able to like act quickly and then get back to work.
Thank you. Any of the other panelists want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I think for me, Grace, I think before you can really get to the productivity question, the people that you work with and the people on your team, they need to know that you care. And the way that you show that is by actually developing some genuine relationships, because I think if you try to fake that, you'll be quickly exposed. So for me, it's just sort of the way that I try to operate is that I try to at least get to know the people that I'm working with, the people that are on the team, so that when I'm asking questions about how things are at home or how's their family during, this time of a global pandemic, it doesn't come across as though I'm asking just because I want to get to a productivity question. It comes across as because I'm actually genuinely interested. And I think if you develop that level of trust with people, then it becomes a lot easier to guide the work to the end that you need to guide it to. So to me, that's really the first step, is if you have those relationships with people, it becomes a lot easier in difficult times to adjust in a way that'll still lead you to be as productive as you want to be.
I would jump in there also and say that I completely agree with Michael's point about trust. That is something that is a two-way street. And certainly the leaders in the organization have to take the lead, so to speak, in doing the outreach and making themselves available. And also, I think one of the easiest ways that they can do that is to open themselves up and share some of the things that are challenges for them. I think when people demonstrate some vulnerability of their own, it lets the other team members or employees understand that that's okay. And so I think that there's ways that you can lead that demonstrate your own vulnerability and therefore make your employees more willing to trust you and open up to you. And the opening up and the communication is sort of the key element, because I think also, as Halle was saying, people are working in different industries. There's big and small companies. There are companies where the employees and possibly the leaders are also very concerned about the long-term health and viability of that company, and that creates another set of challenges. You can't sort of presuppose that everybody is dealing with things in the same way or has the same concerns and issues. And so it's a very personal, one-on-one engagement that allows you to really get into what motivates somebody and what do they need. And sometimes what some people need is, I don't want to talk about the pandemic or what's going on in the world or what my challenges are. My work is my escape. Let's do our work. So you just have to understand that different people have different things that they need during times of challenge, and that it's your job sort of as a manager, a coworker, a leader to sort of tease that out and make sure you're as in tune as possible and that you can adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of leads into what I was actually planning to ask next, which is, fostering those relationships with people so that way they do trust you. I feel like that's more difficult in a time like now where, a lot of relationships are built over Zoom or other virtual means. So how do you maintain that? How do you get over that disconnect, I guess is what I'm wondering.
I think for me, one thing that was interesting is that I was always the type of person that when I started at the NFL, and I'm lucky in that I started at the NFL right after Penn State, so it's been quite a journey there. But when I started, I was focused on the work, and I wasn't expecting anyone that I reported to ask me about my weekend or how my lunch was or anything like that. I expected for them to talk to me about football, and I talked to them about football. And that was great. And I had no problem with that. And I would say easily for the first decade that I worked in my job, my manager never once uttered a word to me about anything personal, not a syllable. And that was fine. But then as I progressed through the different jobs and fortunately was able to work my way up, I realized that the people that were reporting to me did not have that same mindset. They wanted me to know about their pets, and they wanted me to know about their neighbors and their house and where they were living. And so in order for me to be the kind of leader that they were looking for, I needed to become attuned to that. So I think, as you develop those relationships, that was really important to have done that, so that now you're able to sort of lead the team in a way that they want to be led, always with keeping the work goals in mind, but it's sort of delivering to the needs of the team so that they can then deliver their best performances for the organization.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had similar experiences, not so much with it sounds almost like there's a generational aspect that you're referring to, but it's also just like every individual is going to need different things from their manager, and the one thing that I think is the catch-all, one size fits all rather, is for me, in holding individual meetings with somebody and always showing up, especially now. I already held individual meetings. I'm lucky enough to have a small staff of 14 people, so I'm able to work that in to my schedule and also still produce. But I, there were times where it was something else. If we're in the office, something else comes up and it's let's postpone. We have one next week. We're good. We'll run into each other in the hallway. Now it's I never postpone unless it's absolutely necessary. Always showing up and also making it really obvious that we can jump on a Zoom for 1 minute for a question. It doesn't all need to be over, typing on Slack or whatever messaging service everyone's using. Because if you're just living in messages, then it can become very distant very quickly. And a lot of kind of there's just a lot that gets lost in translation there. And then just a second thing I would add, there is something I've found that's been really helpful is, and I think it will be helpful when we're all back together again, whenever that happens, is just promoting again more ownership for individuals, so that they feel when we have big organizational goals, that different people in our newsroom can be owners and champions of certain aspects of that, so that they feel really invested in that and they also want to show up and bring others along with them.
I think those are all excellent points. And the thing that strikes me is there's so much that the manager, the leader can do, as Michael and Halle shared, to help facilitate a connection, with the employee. But I think also, sort of another thing that leaders can do is they can structure sort of smaller teams or working teams or, peers that can support each other. And I think that in addition to employees really wanting to feel a connection to their manager, they also are really missing the collegiality of a work environment and having the opportunity to hang out together and work together and get to know one another. So I do think there's another potential avenue for leaders to develop mechanisms, team building mechanisms, to allow their colleagues to come together, not just for work related things, but maybe they include icebreakers. Something simple might be, okay, we're going to, before we kick off today, I want everybody to show a picture of, their favorite vacation pre-COVID, and then just say a word or two about it, and just, open themselves up, have an icebreaker, get the people to feel some degree of connection to one another. Because after all, it takes, the whole group to move the objectives forward, and that group needs to feel cohesive too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that the coworker kind of section of that, like, that's also an important bond. So then moving forward from that, have you guys found that you've had to adapt your own leadership style at all now that a lot of things are mostly remote? Like, what has changed with how you lead?
I think one thing that I tried to do, I have a team that, the ones in New York, in our New York office, it's about 10 people. And so I meet with them in normal times in my office each and every single day. It's not even a set time on the calendar. We all work geographically in the same part of the building. So I have a sort of a senior meeting each day. And then after that, whoever's around comes into my office, and I just sort of update them on what went on at that senior level, so that they understand we're operating as transparently as possible. They feel like I'm trusting them on what the key messages are for that day, what the key objectives are, and there's a transparency there. So that was something that that the team really appreciated. And so it used to be that informal, in my office, in person situation each and every day. And so in COVID times now, we've continued that, but it then becomes a regular check-in that we do on the phone. The team prefers the phone to Zoom, so I don't care either way. So we get on the phone. It's a few enough number that you know who's there, and we do the exact same thing. So I think that part, the key thing for me to recognize was what needed to not change, and that was some of the things that were working in person and adapting them to the current setup that we have. And then the part that did change is, though, it had to become much more diligent about doing the one-on-one meetings that would sort of happen organically when you're together. And now they would need to be done. They need to be done regularly. So I wouldn't even schedule them with people. I would just keep track for myself to make sure about once a week I'm having an individual phone conversation with every member of that team. How's it going? I'll ask them a question about work, and then we'll spend a few minutes talking just about life in general, just so that they feel connected, and so they feel that they still have the same types of links and the same types of benefits that we had when we were together in the office.
Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Well, one thing that I've always noticed in leadership is you can never communicate enough, and that's true, pre-COVID and even more so today. Whenever you think that you've touched base enough, you haven't. So use that as a rule of thumb. I think something that we can all be sensitive to, in our work relationships and beyond, is that the current pandemic situations create a certain degree of loneliness for people. People are working where they used to maybe be around people and get energy from each other. They're now working very isolated from each other. And similarly, what might be a really good touch point for some employees might not work as well for others. So I would just add, to what Michael was saying, that I would use a lot of different forums for communicating, whether that's email, texting, Slack, Zoom, just lots of variety and lots of touch points, and they don't all have to be, really formal and even long. Err on the side of over communicating, because people are really feeling lonely and isolated.
I would just agree that that's been very much in line with our experience back in March. At the very beginning of working from home, we wrongly started to back off of our Thursday staff lunches, where we would, like, every few of them, it would just be social, and we would just be chatting. And we'd be like, how are we supposed to do that in Zoom? And, like, who wants to eat, like, watch others eat on Zoom? It's weird. And we would have happy hours as a team too, occasionally. And people, like, they go and they have their like separate little conversations, but also, like, sitting there together and chatting and having a drink is just, like, part of that experience and growing together and, like, talking about your projects in a more informal way. And we found out pretty quickly that, like, that we shouldn't get rid of those things. We just needed to adapt. Our team started to ask for it back. So now we watch each other eat on Thursdays, and we do, like, schedule. Sometimes, like, we'll have, one team member will kind of lead a little workshop or something. So we do some skill sharing or brainstorming, and we can also do breakout groups in Zoom that have been really helpful, and then, like, come back and share with the team something broader, even if it's, like, it can be, like, really focused on work, or it can be the icebreakers or some other silliness. And in fact, we're having a team happy hour at 4:00 on Friday. So we just, like, make sure that we're not keeping people outside of the business hours, because we know they're at home and they have other things to do, but it's still important to spend that time.
I think my next question then is related to all of that. And Michael, something you said was that you kind of keep an informal list then, and, for you, of making sure you've checked in with everybody once every week or so. How do you guys stay organized with that, with also, all of the other thousands of things that you have to do?
Yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's really important to try to be diligent about it. So whatever mechanism you use to stay organized, it just has to work for you. So I think for me, it's almost naturally in the areas that I'm responsible for, it leads me to needing to talk to different members of the team. So I'll just make sure, as I'm sort of going through, that workload and that level of attention to detail in those different areas, that I'm spending the time to actually reach out. So even though a text or an email might suffice, in certain instances, I'll replace it with a phone call, just so that we do have that personal interaction. But it's definitely something you have to work on and sort of stay focused on, because it is very easy and it's quicker and it's very enticing sometimes to just try to answer a question with a text and move on. And sometimes that's a must, but I find, at least, that you do have to use that personal touch whenever you can. And now we're sort of back in the office to a degree. So we're based in New York City, and we returned as soon as the reopening phases allowed it. So back on June 22nd, our first wave of employees returned. And because of the building capacities in New York, we're not there 5 days a week yet. So it's staggered, but we have most members of our teams in New York now in the office, so you start to see them again. But a few members of the team have health issues, so they're not going to be returning while we're still in the COVID era. So now it's sort of shifted into making sure that those people that are not physically with us still feel as much a part of the team as they did when we were all together or when we were all remote.
Thank you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was, the only thing I would add is that whatever process or system you use to keep yourself organized, you know, we're super lucky to have all these technologies and reminders and things like that. But I would encourage all of you to find one that really works for you and to rely on it, because you just can't keep all of that stuff in your mind. You can maybe have a little bit of a tally, but when you're, you know, when you're very diligent about something and it's a priority for you, you should put it on your calendar, even if it's you know, at the beginning of the day. You don't necessarily assign it a time, but it's there at the top, and by the time your day is ended, you want to make sure you've gone to it. So there's so many different choices of what to use, but I think it's super important for all of you to have those kinds of mechanisms to keep yourself connected to what you intend to do.
I use, just to get onto a specific example there in case it helps anyone, I use Trello. It's not it's not high tech. It's pretty straightforward, but you can just, you can create boards in all different kinds of formats. And I have one board that's literally just my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So it's just a schedule. And then each of my cards, is it a meeting? I mark it with a colored label and like the time and the person, and I'm able to keep notes on the last meeting, so I can click in that and just pick right back up from where we left off last time. And then it helps me kind of schedule out my day in a reasonable manner too, knowing that like this meeting will probably last an hour, which means I'll have 30 minutes between this and the next meeting, and I can probably put together our newsletter during that time. And so it helps me kind of scope that all out and is usable on your phone and your computer.
Thank you. What has working remotely during the pandemic taught you all about yourself and about the effectiveness of your leadership style? I think we kind of touched on the second part of that, so I think I'm more interested in the first part. Like, what have you learned about yourself? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, ponder.
I think that's a really difficult one, because we're so like focused on like reflecting about like what we're learning about everyone else sometimes. I think maybe one thing I can say is that I sometimes and I think I've always been like this, but I like to get things off of the to-do list, and so I've had to learn to about that, learn how I am and how to kind of like fight that and be more patient and realize like it's just as important to sit down and have a conversation with somebody as it is to actually finish writing something or finish editing something and knock it off the to-do list. So I think it's sort of like I'm learning about myself more, that I'm still kind of impatient and that I need to improve upon that to be a better manager and leader.
Thank you. Michael or Karen, anything?
Well, I think that because, as we've sort of described, communicating becomes such an important component to keeping your employees motivated and focused and your teams doing what they need to do, that, when you think about how you're going to allocate your time as a leader, necessarily you have to sort of shift more of your pie into the slice of motivating and communicating with your team, because it's a heavier lift than it used to be. And so in order to be able to do that, you kind of need to delegate more of your other responsibilities. So I guess I would say, as you sit there and you look at your sort of pie as an employee and the various slices of responsibilities that you have, when you find yourself needing to spend more time on one than another, then you have to come up with strategies for how you yourself are going to manage your other responsibilities. And I would say that clearly one of the better options available to you is to delegate, because whenever you delegate as a leader, you are providing one of your colleagues or coworkers or teammates or employees with an opportunity that they will likely be very excited about, and that will in turn motivate them. And you might not have considered doing that if you didn't have to sort of reshift your pie. So I think from my perspective, when you shift into needing more and more time to communications, then you sort of have to find other places to make that up. And my epiphany would be, more focus on delegation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that you keep seeing examples of everybody's different, and you continue to learn that just because something works for you and you think it's the right way, and you may be convinced it's the right way, there may be another way. And this has been a time where people have had the ability and opportunity to demonstrate that another way might work. Because for us in our field, we sort of had to rethink everything we've done in our off-season calendar. So from the time that free agency would have begun in March up until training camp. And so we had to really focus on that and make sure that what we were going to do would work. And it was different. And so you just have to not get stuck in the old ways of doing things or in what's familiar and comfortable, and realize that there can be new paths to solutions. So I think that was a lesson, just continuing to reinforce that there are new ways to do things, and you can accomplish goals by doing things in different ways.
That's good.
Thank you. So another thing I was curious about then, also kind of along the line of like personal thought, is, when you're forced to work at home and also to live at home, clearly, how do you maintain a healthy work-life balance?
For me, it goes back into some of the scheduling that I do ahead of time, making sure that I'm not getting into the bad habit of overscheduling myself. And then the other thing that I think has been really crucial for me and also for staff members is modeling that behavior and being transparent about taking breaks and ending the day at a reasonable time. And just kind of like, sometimes I just go out of my way just to put in like our Slack channel with the team, like, hey, I'm stepping away for a lunch break. And it's really like just to show everybody, like, I'm taking a break, and maybe you should too. so that we're not all like, sitting on our couches or wherever and like eating and tapping away too. So I think that it's a small thing, but it's helped me actually, like, because I'm like, I should model this behavior, I actually take breaks, which is like, so it's been twofold.
It's really good.
Thank you. So then, stemming from, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say one thing to just sort of have in the back of your mind when you're trying to, partition your time and your day in the same place that you work and live, is I would just say that to try and be present. The worst thing you can possibly do is to be half focused on one thing and half focused on another. So you're much better off spending a shorter amount of time working on your job and being very focused on it than being sort of, oh yeah, you're listening, but you're typing away too, and you're not really present. You're multitasking. You're clearly focused on things that are going on around you. I think the biggest thing that you can say to yourself is, I'm going to be present. I'm going to turn, and when I'm done being present for this, I'm going to go be present for the next thing. So when I'm with my family, I'm going to close my computer and I'm going to do my family thing. And when I'm doing my work, I'm going to close out the other things, and I'm going to be present with my work. So that's just a sort of maybe a little helpful hint that works for me.
Yeah, I would just reiterate, I think that's excellent advice that Karen gives, and it's hard. That's hard, but to me, that is a great way to operate if you can do that, if you can manage to do that. One of the coaches that was working in our office last year in between coaching stops had an expression, and his expression was, be where your feet are. And it's exactly what Karen is saying. And the challenge is just getting to actually do that and being disciplined enough to know when it's time to multitask and when you need to focus on the thing at hand. But if you can master that, that'll go a long way to helping you be successful.
So remote work allows for more flexibility, I think would be an objective statement for the most part. Do you all think that the remote work environment, or even like a partially remote environment, is a feasible option post-pandemic?
Well, I mean, I can start off. I mean, I think for sure we've demonstrated that, work can continue and people can be productive when they're working from home. And there might be, as we were saying, differences in how you do it and different approaches. It's successful. I think that, ultimately there's an element of being in an office or being around your coworkers that creates sort of an energy. And that energy can be kind of intoxicating. You feed off the energy of the people that are around you. And so I think that, there will be an allure to a lot of people that are working remotely and enjoy the flexibility to still have an office environment so that they can be part of that energy. And to the extent that that happens, and Michael talked earlier about how it's already happening in his environment, and he alluded to this as well, but I think it's a really important point. Now the culture is everybody is working from home. And so we all have to reach out to everybody and make all these concerted efforts to make to make this remote work. And that's really good when everybody's working at home. But if you get back to the point where the norm is more in the office and the exception is working remotely, then you kind of shift into another category or another set of potential issues where the critical mass of people are all together and you're kind of on your own. And so you have to sort of be aware of the fact that that could be an element. And I kind of equate it to something that I said to my son one time when he changed schools, which is, you're the one moving away. And so the impetus for staying in touch with your old friends comes to you. And I think that I could see things shifting in the future when a greater number of people are working in an office setting, yet there are still people working remotely. That I'm not saying that managers no longer have the responsibility to reach out, but I think a greater percentage of the responsibility will sort of shift to the remote employee to stay connected and to find ways to be part of the crew, even though that they're remote, which is no way saying I don't think it can work. I'm just saying I think that's one of the elements we have to look out for as we sort of shift back to an office environment where potentially a greater percentage of people are working remotely.
My hope would be that at least partial remote work environment would live past this. And I mean, I think for talking about it as a newsroom, again, like there is that energy, that collaboration that happens when you're all right next to each other. But at the same time, I've always told our team that if I'm seeing you like sitting at your desk all day, then I'm like a little bit concerned that you're not doing your job, because I want you like out and about. And so I would like to see see like an environment where people could be working from home, working from the office, working from wherever in the community, having interviews and just kind of like being of the community, and that we continue to treat everyone similarly, like as if everyone is remote, so that no one's being left out or feels like they're a different class employee. And another thing that I would just add to is that I think that this remote work in many industries, not all, because we all know that some people have still had to report to their jobs. But I think that in a lot of cases in remote work, in making this work, it's shown that we can be employing people with different abilities and with different access to transportation and to a lot of other privileges, and that I hope that that's something that that employers and other managers are kind of like absorbing and will take into their hiring practices in the future.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a situation where we have proved that, you know, remotely we can accomplish a great deal. So that's great. That's an accomplishment. But, you know, I think very much our leadership is of the opinion that there is an intrinsic value of working together. So now we're in that process of transitioning people back to the model of coming to the office regularly. And, you know, that has not been easy for some. Some people, they don't see why we need to do that. So it again requires a lot of patience and a lot of communication. But I think eventually we will be there. And I know this, as soon as New York City sort of throws open the doors to allow companies to staff as they normally would and to operate as they normally would without the government oversight, we will be back full capacity on day one as we were prior to the pandemic. And so everybody's just going to have to get used to that. That's a fact of our life.
Thank you. Yeah. So then related to that as well, a topic that we have kind of been talking about, at least in the news division, is something called like Zoom fatigue, or, you know, similar to like burnout. So I'm curious if you guys have any advice to give to people who are at a point or getting to the point where they feel their work might not matter anymore, or that, you know, given the circumstances, what they're doing isn't worth it.
Well, I think Zoom fatigue is a really real issue. You know, I've even heard stories about how, you know, those computer glasses that save you from the blue light or whatever are sold out everywhere because people are just spending so much time looking at their screens. So I think it's certainly you know, very real. You know, as far as how you get around it in this circumstance, I mean, look at us all right now. We're able to look at each other's faces, and we're able to look in each other's eyes and see one another's expressions. And I don't know what percentage it is, but it's an extremely high percentage of communication is nonverbal. So being able to actually see people is way better than not being able to see them. So Zoom does us a great favor in that regard, but it is exhausting. And after a long day of staring at a small 2-inch person, it's rough. I don't know that I have a solution or an alternative right now. I think that one of the things that is particularly challenging with Zoom is when there's a very large meeting, and you know, so people don't really feel necessarily as able to break in and speak. Certainly there's not going to be like little, you know, sidebar conversations or whatnot going on. It's a little bit more structured and not as free flowing as, say, like maybe a brainstorming session would be, or how you'd want it to be. But I think that the technology does offer tools for people to break out into smaller groups and have those kinds of engagements. And I think that the more we can rely on those elements where you sort of can break apart and not be necessarily in a giant room full of people, but in smaller groups that might satisfy some of the challenges. But I don't know that I have a better solution right now in the pandemic.
Yeah, I think you were talking, like, when you're setting up the question, Grace, it sounded like Zoom fatigue is one thing, and then it was like the spectrum of like, and our work, to the point of people don't feel like their work matters. Like, to me that's a huge spectrum. Like, I have definitely felt Zoom fatigue just with how many meetings, and what I have found that I have to have, and that has been helpful for others, is having kind of like an agenda or time limit. And even with meetings, some of them could last for 2 hours or longer, if we just let it go. And I get to a point where I'm like, this has got to wrap up. I'm going to lose it. And so if I have control in any way, like I'll make sure there's an agenda, and that we have like a timer going on some things. Clearly there are exceptions to that. But when it gets to the point of feeling like my work doesn't matter anymore, or like recognizing that in a team member, that's really serious. That's like full on burnout, right? And I think that you have to kind of address it and encourage a person that that there's a safe space to talk about this, and that we need to be able to figure out like what are the ways that we can address this that are like treating you as a human, and also like making sure that you're still fully committed to the work, because particularly like in every job and in journalism, like we can't have people that are just like kind of phoning it in. So whatever you can do to just have those kind of like candid conversations, if you're starting to sense that, would be really important.
Michael, I don't want to cut you off if you did want to add something.
No, I think it's just, it's really important just to know your coworkers and what they're feeling and how they're feeling about their job. And if they're motivated and if they're passionate about what they're doing, then you hope you can bridge the gap between what we consider normal and the time we're living in now, so that they're still feeling fulfilled. If, they weren't happy in their work initially, then this time would certainly exacerbate that and make it even more difficult, I think, and really cause them to ask questions. But the plus side of that, if you look at it from the positive point of view, is that if this helped some people discover that, hey, there's something else that I think would be more fulfilling for me to do with my time, then that's a good outcome for that person, and it might cause an adjustment in here with our team, with our staff, but in the end, for that individual, probably be a good thing. So I think, the point about having to sort of reevaluate and take stock of where you are because of what's going on around you is real. And it's just something that as leaders, we need to be sensitive to, I think.
Sure. And then I only have really 2 other questions, just looking at the time so we can get to Q&As. And I think this is an important one. So as leaders, how would you recommend that staff members can manage a situation in which their boss is not effectively leading?
I think it's different in every organization based on like how comfortable you feel addressing it and who you can go to. I think talking to peers is not like forming a mutiny, but like just like talking to others who may be feeling to be like, am I feeling this way because of like my personal thing, or is this kind of like a pattern? Is it something that we could address together maybe, or like what do you think would be a productive way to address this? It would be great to have just a candid conversation with your manager if you have that relationship. Some organizations have HR reps and some don't, and some have boards and some don't. So like you have just being kind of aware of your organizational structure, and like based on how serious your concern is also something of importance.
I guess when you're an employee, you know, I think we talked a lot about how sort of the managers are checking out on the employees, but I think there are probably just as many circumstances where the manager is the one that's maybe facing challenges or problems, and that's having a ripple effect on the employee. And I think that when that happens, obviously showing compassion and reaching out to your boss is a really great first step to see what they might be experiencing that you could help with. Making sure that they know that there's something that you need that they're not providing. And then, you know, to the extent that, you know, that doesn't get you anywhere, or you still have some, you know, concerns, then if there's other trusted leaders in the company that you can, you know, reach out to, not necessarily to, you know, share your issues with your manager, but just to sort of say, hey, are you having any staff meetings, or could we collaborate on something, or finding other ways to connect. So, you know, I think that's a really interesting question, because it's a very real scenario that a leader might be feeling so much pressure and so much challenge that they're not necessarily able to give the employees, you know, what they need. So that doesn't mean that you should accept that, though. You definitely need to, you know, have those conversations with your manager, and then, as Halle was saying, if there's an HR person, or, you know, another person on your team that might be a manager of a different group, that you could somehow get what you need. But it's a very, you know, legitimate question, and I could see people finding themselves in that situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think as a manager, if there are certain things you're feeling frustration about that are happening above you, then you need to try to solve those issues for your own team, and make sure that the people that are working as part of your team aren't feeling the frustrations that you feel with the people that you're reporting up to. So, for example, if you feel like you're not communicated enough to by leadership, then you need to make sure you're doing an extra good job communicating what you know to the people on your team, so that you can make sure that they don't have that same issue that you have. So I think that's what, for me, that's what that would come down to, is just communicating and trying to take the challenges that you have as an employee and making sure that you can address some of those things for the people on your team that are reporting up to you.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Just the last thing I was curious about then, it's a bit of a later question, so if there's anything else that you guys did want to add in or mention, please do. But I was just curious about what positions you guys held when you did work for the Collegian, and how you feel like the Collegian has impacted you to this point.
When I worked at the Collegian, and I graduated in 1985, so this was a long time ago, I sold advertising. And so it was my job to go to a lot of the merchants in downtown State College and share with them the size ads they could buy and how much those cost, and to help them you know, come up with the messages that they would want to give to the students through you know, the Collegian, and then come in and work in the office to, you know, create those ads and get them placed in time. And as far as like what it did for me, you know, this was the first time that I really had to sell anything. And, you know, to put yourself as a student out there in front of, you know, business owners, and to have a proposition for them. And then as time progresses and maybe you get a little bit more confident, to actually come in with, you know, your suggestions and thoughts and ideas. And maybe you'd rather do this day instead of that day, or maybe you'd do this size, or maybe you'd like to save your money and do one bigger ad instead of, and to sort of help them strategize. That was probably my first, you know, foray into that kind of opportunity. And I thought it was incredibly helpful and valuable.
Thank you. So you're on the business division. Was it divided at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was awesome. Great. Thank you. Halle, I don't know if you want to go.
Sure. When I was at the Collegian, I served as I was a crime and courts reporter for 2 semesters. I was a Metro editor, campus editor, and then for the final year, the managing editor. And it was my college experience. But don't tell the alumni society board at the College of Communications I said because I also sit on that board, and I think it's very important to go to classes and get good grades. But I definitely owe so much to the Collegian, that experience, because so much of what I learned in crime and courts reporting, and then with the editing, the pace, the urgency, the working with so many different people, I still take that into everyday work now.
Thank you.
And for me, I worked on the sports staff as the Collegian, covered different sports, and I was the beat writer for football in the 1995 season. So yeah, I mean, to me, it was a terrific experience. It was definitely a first job for me, so that when I interviewed for my position at the NFL, they counted sort of my collegiate experience covering Penn State as a first job. So it helped me tremendously. I would absolutely say for me, it was way more valuable to learn how to work at the Collegian and in that setting than my classes. The Collegian was more important. The classes were great, but there are things that I learned at the Collegian by doing the real world work that you never could have learned in the classroom. So for me, I remember thinking that while I was at the Collegian, and I continue to think that now. That experience was invaluable. Grace, I still read the Collegian online constantly. Constantly.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad there are people doing that.
I'm doing it for sure. No doubt about it.
That's funny. Well, thank you.
There you go, Maddie. You've got that recorded, so you can use it as a soundbite.
All right. Well, that is all I had, unless you guys want to add anything else specifically. Not sure, Jordan, if you wanted to do the Q&A or what the plan is there.
Yeah, well, I had one question, and if anyone else wanted to jump in really quickly, and I know Chuck wanted to make a quick note too. The only question I had, and Maddie, keep me honest here, I know Sarah had to drop off, but we had the head of the news division, editor-in-chief, and then we had the head of the business staff on the call today. And roughly, it seems like the new candidate class coming in at the Collegian is basically the size of the staff. A huge new candidate class, right? So I guess my question is, and I don't know if anyone has direct experience with this of late, but essentially, how do you handle newer employees in this age, right? How do you onboard? How do you get them to feel part of the team where others have already had the human connection from having been in the office with you? Any thoughts or anecdotal information about that? I think probably would be helpful for the students.
A few things I can add to that, because we actually expanded our internships to remote this semester, so it expanded the pool of candidates, but also kind of the difficulty, right? But we're kind of like, the only real change here right now is just some people are in different time zones, so we just have to communicate about that. A couple of the things that we do, we assign mentors that may or may not be possible with the situation with the candidate class. We stress hugely from the first conversation we have with candidates to bringing them on as interns, or even when we're onboarding entry level folks, is that we're super available, but like we need them to get in our faces. So initiative is like the top quality that we look for in people. So we ask them to kind of like figure out like how can you take initiative and be connecting with us on a regular basis. We structure and schedule trainings led by different people in the newsroom too. So we have fact check training. We have training on our breaking news shifts, training on how to contribute research and backgrounding for our Board Explorer news tool. We have training, so just like all kinds of things, and that gets them touch points with everybody on the team, and also gives them something from the beginning that they can immediately start doing fact checks and start doing research to get them, wrapped into something, and they can start to see if that's something of interest to them that they would want to continue through.
Yeah, I don't know how you typically onboard in a non-pandemic situation, but I think one of the best ways to get sort of everybody grabbing the row and rowing in the right direction, a lot of times is many of these things that Halle was talking about. I'm a big proponent of mentorship and having new employees have a go-to person that might be a peer that they can rely on safely. But I think that one of the best ways to get people moving in the same direction and part of the team is you have to have a really, really important and crystal clear sort of like vision, direction. What are we all trying to achieve? Like all the people that work in your organization have to understand that these are our hallmark 3, 4, 5 things that we're trying to achieve. And the role that you have is directly connected to this. We can't achieve this particular goal or objective if you don't do what you're supposed to do. So helping people immediately understand what those top priorities are and what they're gonna do on a day in and day out basis impacts at least one of those priorities is super important. So, just to throw them in and tell them like tasks is not going to align them with like your culture and your priorities as much as it will to help them understand why their job is important and relevant and directly applicable to, the organization's priorities. So that'd be my 2 cents.
Yeah, and then I agree with all that. And I would just say the other thing we do is we try to have, after they go through all of the human resources onboarding process, when someone comes to our team, I try to make sure that there's the person that they're reporting to, or the person that, a person that's been on our team a while. I'll try to make sure that they are doing some outreach to the new person above and beyond what would be required from just the perspective of them doing their job, just so that they feel welcome. Because all beginnings are tough, and it's never easy to start something new. And I say that as somebody that's had one job since college. But the point is, you see it, you understand it. Like it's not easy when someone comes into a new situation. So I think it's very important to try to make people feel comfortable. And if they feel comfortable in their surroundings, then you're going to get the best out of them from a work perspective.
Yeah, it's a great point. Chuck, I know. So Chuck Hall is on the call as well, and he had a good thought that he was gonna tee up as well, in part related to, is my work useful right now, and what kind of manager am I right now, and how am I most effective? So I'll hand to you, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. This is a really good call. I really appreciate all of the insights that everyone has shared. I'm the immediate past president of the AIG board, so I'm just kind of hanging in the background, and Jordan's my successor, and I couldn't be happier about that, to have all the weight of the world on Jordan and not on me anymore. But so in my professional life, I work as a business coach, and I use an instrument called Best Work Data that some of you at the Collegian have completed. There is part of the survey that provides 3 reports related to working remotely. One is, what are your strengths and challenges about working remotely? Another one is for your manager to have, so your manager can see how to work with you most effectively based on your strengths and challenges. And the third one is for managers, so they can understand how they need to adjust their management style based on working remotely. This is absolutely at no cost, and Jordan can send information after the call for anybody who's interested in that. or if you have a pen or pencil, you can send a request to me. My email's really easy, chuck@chuckemail.com. So I'm happy to share that with anybody. It's really insightful, and I use it with my clients, and they see a lot of value out of it.
I think it also, Chuck, gets to, I think Mike said it earlier, where what you've done before and how you've done it, it may or may not always be the right way forward. And there are other ways to get things done, and sort of opening yourself to, a bit of an assessment like that to determine, who you really are and where your strengths really lie, and maybe some surprising elements to that, then I think helps you to be a bit more effective, especially in these weird times. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to help with that if anyone's interested.
I didn't want to jump on the toes of anyone else, so I'll just pause to see if anyone else, any of the students had further questions for our panelists.
I have a question. My name's Lauren Kang, and I'm actually the sales manager or director, like Karen, how you were in sales. And I found, actually this just happened to me while I was in this Zoom call. Some of my account executives, AEs, they were texting me and calling me, asking me questions. And I feel like this is kind of hard for me to establish boundaries, especially when you're working online. It's really hard for me to not respond to them. I obviously will respond to them, but it's kind of hard to set those boundaries so they know that I'm not available at all times of the day for them to just call me, especially if I have something going on. So I just wanted to throw it out there how you guys set your boundaries, and what you think would be an effective way to help me with my problem.
Well, certainly, one important thing is to try to understand something that you would consider that's super urgent, that you need to know about right away, versus something that you feel like is important, but it could wait. If you can sort of parse out in your own mind, these are the things that I need to really respond to quickly because bad stuff will happen if I don't, versus I can get to these whenever. So once you can parse those out, I think, and you can share that with your your staff members. And I think that beyond that, one thing that works really well is to say that as an example, during the weekdays, I will get back to you within 24 hours unless it's an urgent matter. So you just sort of set expectations right up front. And I think that if you can do that, it will help you. You won't feel the pressure to respond in an hour when you've already set up sort of a service level agreement that you would get back to them in 24 hours. But embedded in all of that is still how do you percolate up the things that you feel are the handful of couple little things that you would want to know about immediately, and maybe are those kinds of things you say, for anything like that, you have to call me. Okay. Anything else, text me or email me or do something else, but try to partition out the really super important ones and then set up an expectation that you're comfortable with for the rest.
Thank you.
Lauren, I used to have a boss at the Wall Street Journal who, I'll botch the exact times, but she had we'll call it a 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. fine jar. In other words, if you send something, anything, even if it's really important, Mike's probably going to disagree because you got Monday Night Football going until all hours of the night. But regular course of business sort of stuff, if you send a note at 10 o'clock at night that can wait till the next day, thereby sort of adding extra stress, and because people are going to see it right now. So if you send it, she started to fine us. I mean, it's gimmicky, but it's a thing.
Well, it helps create a culture, right?
I was the worst offender, and it worked in time to a degree, but not really.
When I started in my job, Lauren, it was obviously before the time of cell phones. It was before the time of email. The culture was set, though, that before we left on Friday, we had to submit to the boss's assistant where we were going to be over the weekend and a phone number we could be reached at. It was called the weekend sheet. So
Wow.
even back before technology existed, where you have your office in your pocket and you're mobile 24/7, our culture was when someone calls, you answer the phone. So that has been ingrained in me for a quarter of a century. So I'm cognizant of not bothering other people with things that are not crucial, but I get incoming from our clubs all the time, all the constant. And that's it. And I would just say, I'm fortunate and so thankful that I love my job. So because I love it, it doesn't always feel like it's work. I'm happy to talk about whatever problem there is in Cleveland or Carolina at any time, but the time is when the teams want to talk. So for me, that's become a constant. And the only way I kind of get away with that at home with my family is that the job has preceded the family. So my wife only met me. She stepped into this craziness. This didn't start after we had another pattern established. So it's become normal. But Karen's advice is right on, and Jordan's is as well. And if you can follow it, that's great.
Thank
As
you.
someone who's had lunch with Mike, I can attest. I've never seen someone eat a sandwich and answer emails at the same time, and sometimes talk on the phone at the same time.
But you see, that sounds terrible, Jordan, because when we're having lunch, I'm focused on the conversation. I am not emailing people.
I trust that you are. Yeah, I never questioned it. You can play back more than I can play back.
Jordan is one of my oldest collegian friends and one of my best friends. And I should have mentioned that from collegian days. That was one of the huge pluses, the great group of people that I met with. So we worked together at the Collegian and have been really close ever since.
This is actually really random, but that kind of makes me think about, we were just talking about, me and Sarah, who's the business manager right now. We were talking about how there's a lot of couples that came out of the Collegian and how a lot of people in like the years previous, a couple years before, so when we were still here, when we like first started out, a lot of them started dating, and some of them are like living together now. They're like traveling like all around the world together, and we're just talking about how there's so many couples that came out of the Collegian.
That's so cool.
Mike, you want this one or no?
You can start, Jordan. I'll take it from there. Go for it.
I married a Penn Stater, but she didn't work at the Collegian, although she spent a good part of her Penn State years at the Collegian. That's just, nature of the beast.
Yep, I did. I met my wife at the Collegian, and here we are many years later, 3 kids later. Yes.
That's so cool.
Collegian was great in a lot of ways for me.
Any other questions from the students?
I actually have one, but I feel like mine is sort of the opposite of Lauren's. I'm the editor-in-chief, which sort of means that I am physically unable to be like, okay, don't talk to me right now. It sort of feels like I literally have to be available like every moment I am awake, and when I am sleeping, it's like, well, I should have seen that message. So do you have any sort of advice for how you can go about sort of like keeping your sanity while you're still constantly having to be like checking your phone, working on something, talking to people about things, stuff like that?
Honestly,
you want that one, Mike?
No.
I would say that I think you still need to set a hierarchy. There's still your staff needs you to be healthy and well rested. And so if you're constantly subjecting yourself to not getting that, and it doesn't mean you should be sleeping 10, 12 hours or anything, but you just need to be reasonable still, so that you are at the top of your game when you're most needed. And another thing that I have had to really be careful about is because sometimes I like to come back to work at night and I'll want to edit a story when I'm not getting a whole bunch of emails and Slack messages. And but I have to remember that if I'm commenting on a Google Doc, that a lot of times people are getting automated emails at the middle, in the middle of the night. And that's really and some of them are, critical because you're editing a story and you're suggesting that they have to do all this additional work or restructure something. and that is not a message that you want to get at midnight. So I kind of like change the way I'm editing if I'm editing at night, so that it's not creating those automated messages. And but again, like you have to set boundaries for yourself so that you're doing your best when you're actually supposed to be on the clock.
And I don't know if it's also possible, Maddie, do you have trusted colleagues that you're off the clock and trusted colleague is on the clock, so you can sort of maybe take yourself out of play sometimes and get some rest? That's one possibility. Another possibility is, there becomes a role for maybe one of the 65 new people to be sort of the assistant, and to sort of, parse out what's really important and what's not, and what rises to your attention and what doesn't, and sort of in a way sort of sits in front of you to sort of manage the incoming.
I think though, when you all get your first jobs, you're going to be in that mindset of trying to impress and trying to do a great job. And if someone that you work with that's been there a few years, or your manager is sending you a message after hours, and if you respond, that's going to be a great thing. I'm going to look, as a manager, I'm going to look favorably on that. I'm not going to think, well, if I'm sending the communication after hours because I'm hoping for a response, probably I won't be sending it if it's something that can wait. But if I'm sending it and I'm hoping for a response, I'm also hoping you're not thinking, gee, I got to wait until Monday to get back to me. Because if I'm sending it, then that means that there's a reason for it. So when you're entering the new job in the work field, I would say you want to go more toward the trying to impress and doing everything you can to be really responsive.
Well, one other thing is that 80-20 rule, right? So if you have, 20% of the people creating 80% of your inquiries and traffic, you might want to sort of touch base with those 20% and make sure that they maybe are a little bit more judicious.
Anything else, guys? Otherwise, we can give all of our busy lives another 13 minutes back off the clock and get back to the email mill and everything else. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Halle. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Grace, for pinch hitting. Did a great job. Really appreciate all the thoughts and everyone's time today. It's a busy world, but I think I'll echo and speak for most here. This was hugely rewarding and valuable, and a lot of good feedback and insights today. So be well, be safe. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate everyone getting together. And again, I'm going to post this, or probably Megan will post it before I get a chance to, up on our LinkedIn, the Collegian AIG LinkedIn, and it'll be on our Facebook as well. So if you missed anything or you want to go back to this or share it with a friend who couldn't be here today, feel free to do so.
Thanks, everybody.
It was really nice seeing you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
all.
so much.
Thank you.